Now, one of the biggest challenges that we have in small ruminant reproduction, particularly sheep, is detecting signs of estrus, or the period in which the female is receptive to the male. Without a ram around, it is about impossible to identify estrus in sheep. There's no writing, there's no behavioral estrus that we can see. And so it's a challenge, because like if you're used to beef cattle or dairy cows or something, you'll see the cows mounting each other. They form heat clusters. With goats, it's very obvious as well. So sometimes we have to use a ram with a marking harness. We actually have a teaser harness that we can put on one of our rams so that they cannot impregnate a ewe, but they can mark them and go through so we can see who is cycling and who is not cycling. And so it's a little tricky on the sheep side of it. Goats, on the other hand, oh Lord, there is nothing more of a hussy than a goat in heat. They flag, they wave their tails, there's mucus, there's vocal behavior, they talk more, the vulva swells, and they will maul the buck. They will chase him down and hunt him down. It's pretty funny, the behavioral estrus of the doe. They are very distinct, very easy to determine when they're in heat. So here's some general signs as we're looking at trying to identify estrus, the period they're receptive to the male, okay? Not the whole cycle, just that short period, about 30 hours that they're receptive to the male. And so the ewe is more subtle than any other animal, and it's practically non-existent in ewe lambs. Hair sheep do a little bit more than wooled sheep, like the Dorpers, the Katahdins, the St. Croix. They do a little bit more, and they'll seek out the male. They'll walk the fence line. You'll sometimes see a little bit more increased vocalization, and maybe some swelling in the vulva. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to need a teaser ram of some kind to detect estrus. In the doe, they're very similar to cattle, but they're not as likely to mount or stand to be mounted. However, they will group up. There's going to be increased vocalization. They're restless. They'll stop eating and only focus on the fact that they're in heat. You'll see a swollen vulva. You'll see a discharge, and they will rub up against other goats. They will rub up against you, and really are pretty obvious about when they're in heat. Now, the reason we're getting to all this and through the hormones and everything else is because the impact, estrus synchronization, so the synchronization of the entire cycle, is only done in about 7% of sheep farms, and I think that number is up now from when that data was collected, and about 39% of goat farms. But now a lot of the club lamb breeders, because we're using laparoscopic AI so much more than we were just 5 years ago, there's major benefits to estrus synchronization. And it's because we can schedule lambing and kidding and have a plan for what we're doing. We can concentrate our labor forces into those two operations. And so we're able to really know, hey, we're going to be lambing during these 2 weeks, all hands on deck, and then you can kind of relax around some other things. Generally, because you're so focused on lambing or kidding at that one time, you actually see reduced mortality, and you don't miss anything. It's great for uniform kid crops and lamb and kid crops so that everything's of a consistent age. You don't have year-long lambing or kidding, and it allows you to improve your marketing. So a lot of good things can come out of estrus synchronization and consistent lambing crops. The next thing we need to visit about is dig in a little bit more about why we see periods of anestrus, or the period of not cycling. And there's 5 major reasons. One is seasonal, and we talked about sheep especially being seasonal breeders, goats too, especially the meat goats. There's a postpartum anestrus, where after they've lambed, they're not cycling. Lactational anestrus, that is prevalent in sheep and goats, but I will say there are some ewes that will breed while they're lactating and raising another offspring. Nutritional, if they're going under any kind of nutritional stress or nutritional deficiency, they're going to go anestrus and not cycle. and stress-induced, like if predators are involved or anything like that, that can induce stress levels, and high stress levels will shut down the estrus cycle. And so what happens in anestrus that we see is that the ovaries are still capable of functioning. You can induce an anestrus ewe to ovulate, and the pituitary is still functioning. And so we're trying to figure out the hypothalamus is still secreting some GnRH, but what's the major cause? And what happens is it's the consistency and regularity of the LH, the luteinizing hormone, pulses. And so due to a lack of these regular pulses of GnRH, we don't have these regular pulses of LH, and so the structural changes on the ovary are minimal, so that follicle on the ovary is not developing. There's not the gonadotropic hormone support to allow it to develop. And so as a result, we're not getting any estrogen out, there's no progesterone, no CLs. So while we do have everything functioning, it's just that it's inconsistent support to really develop those ovaries. So the next slide is going to pick up some more, and we should be getting close to wrapping up the female repro.